guys, it's Misha and welcome back to my channel. With Pride Month coming up, I thought it would be a great idea to interview people here in Dublin and see if they think that children should be allowed to transition. Think that children should be allowed to transition, and at what age?
Yes.
At what age?
Yeah.
I think any age.
I think maybe 16.
16.
16's good
Okay.
age where you kind of have a
Got
bit more
it.
say.
I think I should get my pronouns tattooed, they, them, on my forehead. Question is if we think that children should be able to transition, you know, medically. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Is
sure.
there any, like, age specifically?
Oof.
I don't really know.
No.
For me, no.
Okay.
I would say no.
Any age?
I think any age.
Any age?
But she's a good person to speak about it because she's actually a trans woman.
Oh yeah, what pronouns do you use?
She here.
A trans woman.
Is there a specific age you think that a child can make that decision?
I don't know if I'm personally qualified because I just found out I'm trans like this year.
Okay.
So
I recently watched a video of a 14-year-old girl.
Women are not simply what we wear. I'm not a bleeder nor a menstruator, a womb carrier or a uterus haver.
And she read her poem called I Am Not a Dress. And it was inspired by all of the trans indoctrination going on in her school.
At a parent-teacher meeting, a mother told me that her child, who we called Lucy, identified as a boy and wished to be called Liam. After this, I set about preparing the class for Liam's social transition. I taught lessons investigating and challenging gender stereotypes. I said, Tilly wasn't happy because everyone saw her as a boy, but she knew she was really a girl. My pupil Ray asked, so boys can change into girls? And then Julie chimed in, and girls can change into boys? Yes, I said, the person we've been calling Lucy is really a boy and is now ready to tell us all. Liam told the class, I've always felt like a boy. My new name is Liam.
I know where we need to get a pint next. What even is that?
Resist what?
Do you think parents would be considered transphobic to, you know, want to let their children wait until 18 or no?
I think they should be open to allowing them to express themselves, but I wouldn't go down the route of like medical procedures until they're of age.
And do you think it's considered transphobic if parents want, you know, their child to wait until 18 or
No.
Or no?
Depends on what
it's
way they
in
go
their-
about
I
it.
think it's in their best health because for some people it can be a life or death. It's like essential medical care that they need.
And I literally just case by case basis, I think,
Sure.
in my personal opinion.
Have to go to therapy first and get a psychiatric assessment?
100%, of course.
Hey guys, so it's me, Misha from the future, and I wanted to add my personal opinion on this into this video. And I have to say though, I was pleasantly surprised that the people I interviewed generally said the same thing about therapy. Yes, they believe that children should go to therapy first before medically transitioning. Where we disagree though is that I believe children cannot transition medically at all until 18. They really should not be doing that. And I want to talk about why. And the reason why I think this is so important to talk about is because we're living in a time where trans influencers have been caught sending children puberty blockers and hormones. And these are just the ones that have been caught. There have been multiple cases of this happening already, illegally supplying children with these hormones. And God knows what's going on in these online forums, these trans forums. So this is really concerning. Children should not be on puberty blockers. A lot of children who express discomfort with their gender identity end up growing out of it. So after puberty, which makes sense because puberty is a very uncomfortable time for a lot of children and a lot of teens.
85% of children who experience gender dysphoria and cross-sex identification feel differently when they reach puberty, and therefore any medical interventions are not recommended.
A majority, not just some, a majority of children expressing discomfort with their gender identity, with their bodies as they're growing up, as their bodies are changing, actually grow out of it and settle into their identity and are fine. If you would just leave these children alone, let them go through puberty, and then decide if they really need to medically transition, which should be the last resort, that would prevent so many people from ending up as detransitioners who regret having these surgeries, who can't breastfeed their children, who have all these complications, who lose all sensation in their genitals. I mean, that is tragic if you listen to these detransitioners and their stories, which of course mainstream media doesn't pay attention to. But if you would just let these children grow up and then make that decision as an adult who can consent, who can fully understand this and all the complications that could happen with these surgeries. That's not what's happening here. That's not what trans activists are fighting for. A lot of trans activists are saying, no, this is a trans genocide if we're not allowing children to transition. This requires our immediate attention. We have to allow all children to get gender-affirming healthcare. We have to let them chop off their body parts. We have to let them get sterilized. It's very manipulative the way that they talk to the parents of these children. They will say, would you rather have a trans son, if it's a girl, or a a dead daughter, basically implying that if the parents don't allow immediate surgery or hormones, then the child will die. The child will kill themselves, and it's the only way. You have to allow them to mutilate their bodies immediately. Now, the thing about that is that the suicide rate isn't decreasing as society is becoming more accepting, as we are affirming everybody left and right. Therapists have to affirm everybody, because if they don't, they can lose their license. And there, of course, are the just straight up greedy therapists and doctors who just want money, who want immediate profit, so therefore they immediately affirm the child. So now hardly any therapists are taking their time to talk to the child or to the teenager and see if there's some underlying cause here, if there's another mental issue going on, if there was a traumatic experience. No, because when you look at Big Pharma, of course it makes sense for them in terms of getting money to hook children on lifetime use of estrogen or testosterone, and then of course top and bottom surgery later on. So if you follow the money, it becomes quite clear why there's such a rush to get kids diagnosed as soon as possible. Yes, you're trans. Oh, you're trans too. You need medicine, you need surgery. Or showing kids highly explicit books in grade school about different sex acts. God knows why they need to see that, right? They get traumatized from this. And of course they're going to be confused. Also insisting that girls can become boys and boys can become girls, and almost as if it's by a wave of a wand. Like you will turn back time and suddenly you're a girl. And that's just not how it works. You're failing to tell children that this is a lifetime use of these hormones, possible complications, and you shouldn't have to tell children this, because children cannot fully comprehend this, they cannot consent, and they should not be medically transitioning. Anyone who thinks that a child can make this kind of decision really needs to think again, because I don't know what else to say. I don't know how you could possibly be advocating for this. How can a child make this kind of decision? They can't drink, they can't drive, they can't vote. They can't get a tattoo, right? If you get a tattoo as a teen and then you regret it, you can remove the tattoo. If you as a teen think you're trans, everybody around you affirms you immediately, and then you get surgery, what then if you realize you're wrong? That's 1,000 times worse. And yet we're telling kids, no, you can't get a tattoo, you're not responsible enough, but you can get sex reassignment surgery. And of course, when even adults are coming out and telling their story about how they have detransitioned, how they were manipulated and told that all their problems will be solved if they just, change their gender, for children, it's going to be 10 times worse. For children who believe in things like the tooth fairy, you're telling them that they can just magically take this pill and they will be a different gender. I also want to talk about this link between autism and individuals who identify as transgender. Now, studies do support that there is definitely some sort of link. We don't know if it's just correlation, but a lot of detransitioners also talk about being on the spectrum, how they were diagnosed with autism. Chloe Cole, for example, who is a detransitioner, was diagnosed with autism.
A gender specialist who referred me to the surgeon just told me that the regret, this failed transition, is just another part of my gender journey. And after the surgery, I'm never going to be able to breastfeed children. And aside from that, I've had some complications pop up years post-op, and I haven't been able to get any help with that. I likely won't be able to be a candidate for any reconstructive surgery either.
And I think this is something we should definitely be thinking about, because it is a lot of girls right now who are transitioning. It used to be a very small percentage of boys, now it's just predominantly girls, but it's also girls who tend to get misdiagnosed a lot when it comes to autism. They don't get the correct diagnosis because autism is harder to spot in girls, and also ASD is a lot more common in boys. So I think an important question to ask is, how is somebody's symptoms of autism potentially influencing their experience with their gender identity? Because if you take a look at these detransitioners, a lot of them talk about having this diagnosis, right? Or not getting evaluated for ASD and then getting a late diagnosis and struggling with symptoms their whole life, and then only later on realizing, oh, I had autism this entire time, but the doctors just didn't see that. And again, I think this is something we really should be looking into, because what you hear a lot from these detransitioners and girls who were not even evaluated for ASD or got a late diagnosis is that they were never fans of these traditional gender roles or gender stereotypes, and they were more, tomboyish or feminine boys, which, by the way, you can be a tomboy or a feminine boy, doesn't mean you have ASD or have gender identity issues, but that's just something you hear a lot when you're talking to people who have detransitioned, who say, yes, I was a tomboy, I was a feminine boy, and everybody around me started telling me that I'm trans, or these online forums told me that I'm transgender and I should immediately transition and everything will be so much better. So instead, Just a thought. Maybe let boys be feminine if that's what they want to do, let girls be masculine if that's who they are, and we don't have to shove pills down their throats, we don't have to tell them to chop off body parts, and if that's something they really think they need to do, if that's something that their therapist thinks they really need to do, we wait until 18, we see if their gender dysphoria has been alleviated through social transition, and only then are they able to get this sort of medical procedure, which comes with so many complications. That's the last resort. If that's what they really need to do to live their life happily, then okay, as at 18. But before that, there should be a lot of steps, because as you're growing up as a kid, as a teenager, you're constantly changing, right? So that's my opinion. I don't think that we can tell 10-year-old Bob that he's actually Brenda because he likes to play with Barbies. And since everything is about immediate affirmation and immediate profit, a lot of therapists, they don't even have this criteria for being diagnosed with gender dysphoria, or they say you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. That's the narrative now, which is crazy, because then a lot of people transition and end up with gender dysphoria because initially they didn't have it, they were fine, and then they mutilated their body, and now they don't feel comfortable in their body, which is tragic, which is exactly what you hear these detransitioners talking about.
And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. You know, I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child.
But we don't care, right? We only care about the successful cases where transgender people feel great after the surgery, which is amazing, good for you. But when you have this huge spike in trans people and trans kids, and then they detransition and they're miserable for the rest of their life, let's just ignore that, right? That's fine. Don't pay attention to that. That is wrong. That is wrong. And how can someone make an informed decision when you're hiding an entire group of people from mainstream media and only showing people how this is life-saving, how if you don't let your 6-year-old do this, then you're a murderer, transgenocide? It's ridiculous. How can parents make an informed decision? How can children can't make an informed decision? They trust their parents. And so therefore, when you're scaring parents and telling them, no, you have to transition your child or the child will kill themselves, that's manipulative. That's not even accurate. If you take a look at the suicide rate after surgery, yes, there's a small window where the patient usually feels a lot better, almost as if it's a placebo, and then the suicide rate increases again. It goes up again. Same thing with society. As I've said, as we're becoming more accepting, affirming everybody left and right, still, suicide rate isn't decreasing. Maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't us affirming these people, but there's something else going on mentally, and maybe we need to further look into this. The goal in healthcare should always be to avoid medication. That should be the last resort. Instead of completely stopping a child's development by giving them puberty blockers, which parents are lied to and told are completely reversible with no side effects, which isn't even true. If you take a look at infertility issues, problems with bone density, these are just the side effects we know. We don't know about the long-term side effects because these puberty blockers have never been used in this way before, ever. And so now we're saying, no, it's completely fine. Don't worry about it. You wouldn't do this with any other medication. When you stop a natural process, like with birth control, and then you tell all these girls, no, that's completely fine, there are no issues, and then you take a look at the side effects list, and you realize, no, this is not safe, actually. This is not a good idea and should only be used as like the last resort. If you have some like serious issue that's only alleviated by going on birth control, this is just stopping ovulation. Some use it to stop their periods completely. But you take a look at the side effects, risk of blood clots, your mood is messed up, you got your attractions are actually messed up. A lot of women say they're not attracted to their partners after going off birth control, increased risk of cervical cancer, increased risk of breast cancer. And doctors are prescribing it for every little thing. You got acne? Oh, here's a prescription for birth control. Like it's no biggie. That's just stopping ovulation or reducing ovulation. Now think about stopping puberty. Let's just put a pause on puberty. You figure out your gender identity. I know you're going by Fair right now. Let's figure out what that means later on. For now, let's just completely stop puberty, right? A lot of detransitioners talk about how this was actually a result of internalized homophobia, where they just were really unhappy with their sexuality, and so they thought that if they changed their gender, that'll fix things up. Because a lot of people who regret transitioning actually realize that they would have just ended up after going through puberty as gay adults and they wish they hadn't transitioned. Or a lot of women who talk about detransitioning say that this was a result of internalized misogyny and therefore the escape is to become a man. Easy peasy, right? Or now non-binary, because then it's like, okay, I don't really have to do anything. I can just say I'm non-binary and therefore not a woman and therefore don't have to deal with any problems related to sexism that modern day feminists are saying is everywhere. Also, I've heard people relating this to sexuality and how kids and teens go through phases where they don't know their sexuality and they just, they try on they try on different sexualities and they're like, no, this is me, no, this is me. Yes, teens go through all sorts of phases, but I'm not sure how you can possibly relate this to something like gender identity, where if you think that you're trans and then you go on puberty blockers and then hormones and then surgery and then you say, oh, actually I'm not trans, what then? What then? Because if, let's say you think you're a certain sexuality, you start dating a member of the same sex or not the opposite sex, whatever, and you're like, no, that's not really for me, that's not my sexuality, I'm actually this sexuality. Okay, what's the worst that can happen in that scenario? You're not chopping off body parts, and then, that's a completely different situation, and it's 10 times worse. It's not just, oh, I liked this pronouns last week, now I like these pronouns. No, you are going through irreversible procedures that you can end up regretting for the rest of your life. I don't think you can compare those two things. So I think this panic is justified when now children are being involved and parents are being manipulated and told that they have to affirm their child's trans identity as long as they say that they're trans. As long as that 10-year-old is saying that they're trans, if they think they're trans, 100% valid, start puberty blockers, get hormones and surgery. That's very problematic. Also, I want to add that we spent hours walking around Dublin trying to find older people to interview. Nobody wanted to answer this question after they heard it, and I can only guess that it's because they don't want to get canceled. For example, when I asked people in London how many genders there are, actually more people answered that question. I know it's also a very difficult question to answer, but more people were willing to talk to me about that. But when children are involved, when I'm asking if children should transition, we spent hours walking around trying to get people to answer. It was very difficult, and only the younger people seem to want to answer. Okay, so now you know my thoughts. Back to the interview.
But do you think they should go to therapy first, or have to go to therapy first and get a psychiatric assessment?
100%, of course. From the top down as well. I think if you're talking about healthcare, it shouldn't be like a certain age quota that you have to meet. It should be just definitely more of like a person based. I think, definitely.
100%. I don't know. I think it really is case by case basis, honestly, for me, because I speak to her or different trans people, and it really does. People discover themselves at different ages, and people, for example, trans youth have a really high rate of suicide. So if you are mentally struggling a lot by not being able to transition, you should be able to. But it's kind of a case by case basis, like I was saying.
There's an exact age or anything. I think it's just more like if the child is in need of it, they should be allowed to do it.
I could never imagine how those people feel, so I think I can't really decide whether.
Right. But they should be allowed to transition as children, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure you like and subscribe so that you see my next video, and also comment your thoughts down below, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye. Oh, that's Batman and Robin? That's like the 10th one I've seen.